the image of the waterfall, the droplets over the waterfall. So that was very simply, was just a metaphor for mind moments, because we can have this quite static idea of what my mind is. Even though the experience is completely different, often we're not paying so much attention inwards, if you like, to the inconsistencies or the sort of wildly sort of differing aspects of what we call mind. We can sort of clump it all together. So really, it's that image was just to demonstrate those droplets are just mind moments that we can be aware of, and awareness being some of those droplets, if you like, that reflect other droplets within the waterfall. I also just when I was thinking about this image, I thought of another image which is of a murmuration of starlings. And a couple of years ago, I was up in Aberystwyth on the North Wales coast, and they have a resident, I don't know, they have thousands and thousands, I think it's over 10,000 starlings roost under the pier at Aberystwyth Beach. And every morning, which I didn't see, but every sunset, and I was there in the winter, so it's about 3:30 in the afternoon, you've got the sky changing colour, and you've got this amazing thousands and thousands of birds flying with each other, some breaking off and then some joining. And that struck me as perhaps another very fluid way of thinking about mind, and within it all these elements, all these moving parts. So I don't know if you can hear what I can hear, but I've got some background noise. I think this is the first day that the bowlers have been out on the bowling green preparing it. So can you hear it? Yes, okay. Hopefully not too disturbing. So today, I want to talk about a couple of things, and maybe just acknowledging that some of the things that we look to bring more awareness to are trickier than others. So I think thinking, which we're going to look at today, is one of the more tricky things, to just know thinking as it happens, and be able to be aware of that, aware of its flow. Maybe that starling image would be helpful here, rather than being caught in the story and the content. So thinking is quite tricky. Seeing, which we've been practicing already, is also quite tricky, but it's really, really helpful if we can get the habit of practicing seeing, just because it's an object that's there all the time. And unless we're resting, going to sleep, or when we're meditating, then seeing will be operating, which is one of the reasons why it's very helpful to at least sometimes meditate with your eyes open, so that you practice under meditative conditions, if you like. You practice seeing. And the other thing that is very tricky as an object is pain, emotional pain or physical pain. I was actually listening to a little something on YouTube a couple of days ago, and it was lovely. It was a bhikkhu, Western bhikkhu, but I could hear certain birds in the background that were very, very familiar from my time in Burma. So I thought it was probably Burma or Sri Lanka. And he was talking about working with pain, and what he was saying was great. And he was doing what many people do when they talk about working in meditation with pain, which is he was referring to postural pain. He's referring to the pain that you get that arises because of sitting, rather than the pain that's there because of injury or chronic types of pain. So those working in relation to pain that's not just there because there's a discomfort from your sitting posture. So hopefully address all of those, but not all today. But today I wanted to look a little bit at thinking, but before that a little bit at mood, the mood in the mind. So that's like a background flavor of feeling. And sometimes when we're sometimes it can be the mind from which we're viewing experience. We haven't quite realized, or we think, oh, I'm being aware, but the awareness is flavored by something else. Something's got in there. But because mood can be quite nebulous and quite habitual, maybe there's just a habitual slightly low mood, or habitual slightly grumpy mood. Yeah, maybe that comes at certain times of the day. Maybe it's first thing in the morning, or maybe it's when you're tired, or when you're in pain. Anyway, I've got a little reading from Bhante. Bhante at his in a mischievous mood, I think. So I thought I'd read that. And it's from a Tibetan Book of the Dead seminar, which I'm sure was given a very long time ago. So he says, "It is rather like the tiger in the Indian story wanting to eat the lamb. The lamb was drinking water from the stream, and the tiger was drinking from higher up. So the tiger professed to be quite annoyed by this. But the lamb pointed out that in fact the tiger was drinking above where he was drinking. So the tiger was polluting the water for him and not the other way round. So the tiger had no excuse for getting angry with him on that account. So the tiger said, 'All right, I am going to eat you for treading on my tail.' So the lamb said, 'Your tail is not here. Your tail is there. How can I be treading on your tail?' So the tiger said, 'My tail is everywhere,' and promptly ate the lamb. So Bhante says, so when I get angry, get in a mood, well, my tail is everywhere. Whatever you do, anything you do is going to offend me, and I'm going to take action accordingly. So sometimes we just get into that sort of mood. I certainly recognize that. So sometimes describe mood as it's a bit like going into a room where you're very, very familiar with a slightly unpleasant color and textured wall, maybe the wallpaper. So it's like the wallpaper of the mind, something that's familiar, but so familiar we just don't quite recognize it. And it's just part of who we are, we think, so we identify with it. And therefore it becomes the lens through which we're looking, and it colors all that we see. So we can check the mood of the mind. We can just feel into that in the same way that we just check to see if awareness is present. We check the quality of awareness. Yeah, so I've worked with this quite a bit, and yeah, one of the ways that I've worked with it is in relation to what I call my burdened feeling. So a feeling where life is a bit much, things feel a bit heavy, as if I've got some sort of weight on my back. And And I just noticed that it became a bit more conscious of it. Oh, there's this feeling. It's not looming large in my experience, but it's definitely colouring it in some way. And the more I sort of turned my attention to it, just noticed it, I noticed that it was really there quite a lot. And it had sort of corresponding feelings and thoughts to it that could reinforce that, or not, depending on how it was. But the more that I noticed it, the more that I just sort of checked and just saw it as an object, practiced seeing it as an object in experience, something it wasn't necessary to identify with, but seeing it as a mood in the mind. And over time, it's most of the time it is not there these days. Actually, at times it's there, and it's often arising in relation to physical pain. There's that burden feeling, oh, it's too much to do what I need to do, while I've got certain sorts of pain going on. So having just clocked that recently, that's going to be, if you like, the current area of exploration with mood. But most of the time, that weight feels like it's just dropped off, and the mind has become somewhat purified of that mind state, of that mood, through just noticing it. So, and I think working with habitual moods in the moment, there can be a little bit of freedom from them in the moment, that quite noticeably when there's a disidentifying happens with the mood. But over time, I think there can be a more significant, if you like, clearing of it. It's like the more you dispel it in the moment, the less frequently it arises. And I wonder if this is one of the things, or perhaps what Bhante had in mind when he said, with a little bit of effort, our state of consciousness could be significantly raised. With a little bit of effort, our state of consciousness could be significantly raised. So it really takes very little effort to just check the mind, check the quality of the mind, and take that in, be aware of that. But over time, it frees the mind from the particular mood states. And even when the mood is very nebulous, you can't really call it anything, you can't really identify it, but you can feel it, can feel into that. And stay with the feeling and the feelings in the body sensations. Well, and sometimes thoughts, what does this mood say? How is it speaking? How is it talking? So sometimes I'll find in my own experience the mind state feels okay, so I check in, what's the quality of the mind? What's the quality of awareness? Feels okay. But when I check it a bit further against maybe the 4 aspects of right mindfulness, so maybe I check, okay, there's present moment awareness. What's the quality of energy or effort in the mind? Is there some degree of openness or interest to physical and mental processes? Does the mind feel alive? Is there that sense of ease and balance, some contentment, how the mind is? So checking back against that, I might see, oh no, there's actually something's missing, or something's actually I'll come to see, oh, the mood is a bit low. So that's one way. yeah, that's that little bit of effort that has an effect on the consciousness, on the awareness. So it's a little bit about mood, a little bit about thinking and thoughts. So thinking, I think thinking is very tricky. It's tricky in meditation, and sometimes I think there's a built-in view that seems to be worldwide that thinking shouldn't happen in meditation. And however many times we get told the opposite, that somehow that view persists, that I don't know where it's come from, I don't know where it's sprung, that thoughts have no place in meditation. So we're working against some unseen force. When I say thinking is a natural function of the mind. Thinking nature. So if you like, the job of thinking is to think. That is its job description. And that's okay. Thoughts can be an object of awareness. We can notice thoughts. Where thoughts become problematic is to the degree that we get lost and caught in them. And that's what we're working with. But it's helpful to not be working with a background view that these shouldn't be happening, thoughts shouldn't be happening. And the tendency perhaps to judge when we do get lost. So I think sometimes when we start working with being aware of the mind, watching the mind and being aware of thoughts, then we notice more of them. We notice thinking, partly because we're noticing it arising earlier in the process. We may not quite feel that, but that's likely that we are clocking thinking happening, after, much sooner after it's first arisen. So it's either John Kabat-Zinn or Larry Rosenberg, I'm not sure who, it's another watery image. He says sometimes there's a trickle of thoughts in the mind and sometimes a cascade, and it really doesn't matter which it is. Our job is just to notice, the job of awareness is just to recognize what's happening. So remembering that the object, which is the thought, is less important than the awareness, and the object is, the function of the object in the practice is to help grow awareness, help awareness become more consistent and stronger factor within the mind. And so often, particularly in practices perhaps that we're more familiar with, where we have a single object, so practices like the mindfulness of breathing particularly, often we'll notice thoughts and then go back to the object, go back to the breath. In this more receptive practice, it's not necessary to do the going back part. All that's necessary is to be present. So if you are perhaps lost in thoughts and you have a moment of waking up to thinking, if you can acknowledge that thinking is happening, that's enough. You're there in the present. And if you can sort of stay there and then relax, keep that relaxed, broad awareness, you will naturally notice other objects in experience, notice other sensations, maybe more thoughts. But because we don't have that primary object, it's okay to just sort of stay where you are, if you like, stay with the mind that's there, and allow it naturally to pick up other objects. So there's a lot of potential in being able to observe thinking as it happens. It's happening a lot, often. I think some people more than others. I think there are perhaps people who naturally have calmer, quieter minds. It's interesting, Ajahn Chah, the great Thai master, I've got a lovely reading by him, and he talks about there's some people whose minds just incline more to concentration, and they tend to be people whose minds are quite quiet or incline more to absorption. And then there are others who think a lot, who just have a lot of, their minds are very active, and he says they incline more towards wisdom. Sometimes in the form of reflection, and sometimes in the form of this type of practice, awareness practice. And he says it doesn't really matter if you like. It's your way into practice. You end up at the same place, but there can be different minds can have different tendencies, and therefore different practices that are particularly suited to their own minds. So we give a lot of power to our thoughts, and this is one of the reasons why it's so crucial to work effectively with recognizing a thought as a process in the mind. It's a mental process, mental events arising. Where we give that power is when we go more into the content of the thought or the story. So we believe, often quite unquestioningly, we believe our thoughts, even when they madly contradict each other. They're swayed a lot by other factors in the mind, by our emotions, by our views. So it can cut out a lot of suffering if we're able to recognize it's simply thinking. It's thinking happening. That power is an identification. We identify with the thought as true. It's me thinking. It's my thought, and there's a belief in it. Or sometimes, if we don't like it, there's still the belief, but we don't want it. We don't want. So it sets up quite a conflict. So if you haven't spent a lot of time watching the mind in this way, it's quite helpful to do it in short periods. So within a meditation, perhaps you spend quite a bit of time just really feeling that grounding in the body. And from there, so there's the body feelings, perhaps hearing different sounds, and just opening up, perhaps for a few minutes at a time, to noticing thoughts, or noticing what else is happening in the mind. And then, so keeping that connection, keeping that grounded connection. And then you might sort of come back and just be with body sensations, breath, sounds, feelings. So you can alternate in that way within the meditation. So if you like, you're going back and forth between a simpler or an easier object or number of objects in and around the physical senses to a more subtle, complex one in terms of thoughts. We all can recognize thoughts in the mind. We all do that because we know what we've been thinking a lot of the time, even without much awareness being there. With just a very, very sort of slight awareness, you can know what you've been thinking. So there's just a slight shift in that, rather than only knowing what you've been thinking, you know how a thought feels in the mind. You know that process, and that's, if you like, the right view element. You're seeing a thought as a thought, rather than you're more focusing on the more subjective element of it, which is the content, how this thought relates to me and my life, or my friends, or my job, or those sorts of whatever the content is. So the Burmese teacher U Pandita, who I read the little dialogue yesterday between him and Sharon Salzberg, he says, well, he said, he died recently. He says, any thought can arise in any mind at any time. Any thought can arise in any mind at any time. So he's pointing to the impersonal nature of thinking. Obviously, our thinking is conditioned. It's conditioned by our own habits and biases, and but at the same time, it has this impersonal quality to it. It's very easy to judge ourselves for particular types of thoughts, what they say about me as a person. Mean thoughts, or judging thoughts, or very easy to take all that very personally. So any thought can arise in any mind at any time. Anything that I've thought, not the content of it, but the type of thought, all of you have probably thought as well. So we're going to do a couple of shorter meditations this morning that just to work with thoughts in slightly different ways. So the first one is to do with labeling the types of thoughts that you have. So this is where you can really see that universal nature of thinking, not in the as I say, not in the very personalized versions, but we're looking at the mind overall, thinking overall, and different types of thoughts. And it can be very helpful just to drop in a soft mental label to start to recognize, oh, judging thought. Remembering thought, or a memory, so it's a thought about the past. Anticipating thought. Repeating thoughts. I don't quite know these days what the statistic is, but when I was reading about this a few years ago, it was said that about 70% of our thoughts are repeated thoughts, and some of them we don't just repeat once. We'll repeat them over and over and over again. Like we talk to ourselves, especially if there's a little bit of anxiety around the thought. For myself, I notice this when I'm about to take perhaps a long, complex train journey. I've taken several long-distance ones throughout Europe in the last few years for various retreats, and that planning mind loves to reassure itself that it's not going to forget what it's doing. It's not going to miss its train, and so I can really see those habits of mind. So just clocking the planning mind, the repeating. Oh, I've had that one before. Sometimes I think it's Joseph Goldstein. He starts counting. Okay, train thought number 4. Train thought number 9. So if there's something that's really quite, the mind's having a little obsess around something, that it can just make it a bit lighter, can take it away from being this irritating thing that we wish wasn't happening. Comparing mind is a very useful one to spot. I think we create a lot of suffering through how we compare ourselves, either comparing ourselves to others, and that can sort of settle into quite strong views about, who we are, who we think we are, who we think they are, can really fix things. These comparing thoughts. So good to notice. And sometimes the comparisons are with ourselves. So, I wish my practice was like it was yesterday. Oh, yesterday it was really good. Today it's sort of gone a bit off the boil. It's actually much more straightforward to recognize that comparing, it's comparing happening in the mind, comparing thought. But what's relevant is the present. What's relevant is what's happening right now. And you just recognize comparing mind in the present. So what else is there? One of the liberating things is it doesn't need to go any further than that. Recognize that's what's happening in the mind. There maybe be some feeling with that. And what else is happening? What else? If we're sort of hanging back a little, or sort of that settling back, awareness won't stick to things. It's craving and aversion that stick. Hold on to things, or hold on through that, trying to push them away. But if we're settled back, then it's a lot easier for experience to be like that waterfall. It's not stopping halfway down and sticking to the rocks. It just keeps on flowing. So we can recognize craving and aversion, the thoughts, the wanting thoughts or not wanting thoughts. So yeah, there are a number of thoughts like that, a number of different labels, which I'll drop in when we sit. There's probably others that I haven't remembered, but I'll remember them in the sit. But humor is really helps it be quite light, particularly with thoughts that are that we just find quite hard to be with. We somehow do believe that they've got in there, so we believe what they say. And yeah, especially if what they're saying is that we don't want to be that sort of person, or that it doesn't say something very good about who we are. Sometimes I call these appalling thoughts. The thoughts that the mind just doesn't want, it wants to disown. I'm not that sort of person. It's just too petty, or not that one again. You know, they're just thoughts that you just don't want to have anything to do with. So obviously you don't say it in a judgmental way. It's just the mind having an appalling thought. It's just throwing it up. Any thought can be part of any mind at any time. Okay, so let's have a couple of minutes just moving around, just changing your posture, and then we'll have a shortish sit. Thanks, Akash Sherry, for the question. So don't mention positive thoughts. In a way, in the practice, we're not looking to make a particular distinction between positive thoughts and negative thoughts. They're simply thoughts in the mind. I was just having one of the things that can catch us in meditation is what I call important thoughts. Oh, this is important. This one's important. Actually, from this perspective, we're learning in a way they're still the objects of attention, so they're less important than the awareness. If they're that important, then you know, it's we can reflect on them, we can think on them after the practice. Thinking within the practice, of course, is useful. That little thing is this helpful? Is this necessary? So there's a certain amount of if you like, that meta view of meta, as in of knowing what's happening, which is, it's a mixture of sort of being aware and but it will involve some thought, some conceptualization. But really, we don't make that distinction. There are thoughts that are useful to the practice, and we use them to help keep that sense of awareness, knowing what's happening. So the labeling is something that is useful initially in practice. It's not something that we necessarily do for very long, but it can make a big difference initially to just have a sense of certain types of thoughts seen a little bit stepped back from their content. But if it feels a little bit busy for you, or if you've done this type of labeling before, then you simply know that thinking is happening. You're taking time to settle. Actually, you may well feel quite settled by now at this point. But there might still be a little bit of reorientation from energy being more externally oriented towards hearing, listening, conceptualizing, and allowing that turning about or turning towards the more direct experience. The working ground of body and mind. Nama Rupa. And sometimes when we can access calm and relaxation within our physical experience, there can be perhaps some reluctance to disturb that with opening up to thinking. So you might just need to acknowledge that if that's the case. And just with the instruction to notice if there's a reaching out towards experience, say, of sound, or to a particular sensation within the body. We can have that mental representation of the body, or of inside and outside, here, over there. We can similarly attempt to reach out to sounds, to thoughts. So you don't need to actively seek thoughts or thinking out. Just notice when you become aware of thinking. And how a thought feels in the mind. And you could give these thoughts particular labels, if it's helpful, a soft mental label. Planning, anticipating, remembering. Comparing or judging thoughts happening. If you find there's a particular conglomeration of thoughts, story that you find yourself getting pulled into, if it has quite a strong pull, really feeling that emotional pull, Perhaps giving the story a name: work story, relationship story. So you have a way of knowing what's happening without being fully immersed in the content. Notice any wanting or not wanting thoughts. And you might find these come up particularly in relation to another thought or a story. There's a not wanting that to be happening. A wanting something else. So not worrying about the something else. Staying with the wanting, how that feels in the mind and body. Don't worry if it feels, when you're open to the mind, that's open to thoughts, that there's a lot more happening. Don't worry if you feel distracted. Simply just opened up to another world of experience. Another world in which awareness can know whatever's happening. And at any point, you can just reconnect more strongly with the physical senses. Simplify the sphere of experience for a few minutes before opening up to the wider experience again. You might notice repeating thoughts, fantasizing thoughts. Sometimes we can catch a flavor of the mind simply wanting to entertain itself through its enjoyment of thinking about something. So noticing a sense of pleasure can be very helpful. Pleasure that's driving the desire to think. And it can also be helpful to give the same soft label to any moods that you notice. Moods or emotions. Sadness is here. There's worry in the mind, disappointment, or joy, contentment. Okay, so you've got a few minutes. Anything about your practice from the most recent practice or previous to that? And Maitri Mati will she'll field, that's the right word.
Vajradevi, there's a question from Prabhakari. Have you got that in the chat? Or?
I have, yes. So it's not so much questions here, it's more, but I will answer that, but it's more about your practice, how your practice is going. So maybe just, where has it gone? So it's about mood. Is mood, I think mood probably generally is in chitta. I take chitta to be mood, emotion, and the realm of mental experience, really. So just take it all to be part of that. Yeah.
Okay, and Ali Hurst.
Sorry, are these questions in the chat? Because I'm
just people. So then I'm just, if that person, everybody should be able to unmute themselves now.
Yeah.
So if I say your name, if you just ask your question. So Ali.
Thank you. Yeah, I was really interested. I think it was yesterday you said about like the brain flowing, and so there's different parts coming together at different times. And I've had an experience quite a few times actually. It's as if thinking is happening in one part of the brain, but I'm just not giving it any attention, or giving it not making it bigger than it is. It's just there happening. And I don't know, sort of from today, I don't know if that's because I'm not aware and I need to become more aware of that and give it more attention, or can I just let it carry on doing its thing without getting caught up in it?
Yeah, I think the second thing, really, you can let it, as long as you know that it's happening, you know that thinking's happening, and you've got some idea of you got enough awareness that there's some idea of the content. You sort of know the content, but like you say, it can just happen, and it can just sort of flow on and be part of the overall awareness. But like you say, it's not a particular focus. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Nikki Stearman. Do you want to just go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, so mine was just like reflecting on my meditation then, and I'm very visual anyway, so an image came to mind and I labelled it, and then instantly a sensation within the body. So again, it was labelling that as feeling, and it was as though the two overlapped each other. So it wasn't like this happened, that happened, that happened. It was like thoughts overlapping thoughts. And then obviously the thought was, I want to share this. So then the thought went on to a to-do list of thoughts. And then a remembering thought to remember this.
Great. Yeah. So I think when awareness is, when we're quite present, then it can feel a bit, sometimes I talk about it in terms of juggling. It's like, oh, this happens and then that happens, and sometimes you can see or feel the connections between it. But the mind is hands off enough, if you like, that the mind sort of is doing its own thing. It's doing its own work, and there's enough awareness to simply notice that happening. That observing mind is working with a bit of continuity.
It felt very busy.
It felt busy. Okay, so in that case, I would check that that sense of reaching out, that sense of going towards objects, going towards what's happening, and seeing if it's possible to just settle and let them happen. The judge, I use the judging analogy partly because when I used to do a bit of juggling in the past, and you have to be really relaxed and you have to be quite settled back. If you sort of reach, if you snatch for a ball, then you've lost the rest of them. So yeah, that reaching or snatching, or then there can be quite a lot going on, but it in a way, the mind that's aware of it can still feel spacious, can still feel like it's got its own quality, its own ease and allowing.
I think what I was kind of getting to is my mind was busy in that the thoughts were coming up and then I was labeling that thought, and then something else was coming up and I was labeling that thought. So whereas before I could just sit and notice the thought but not label it, it was kind of like I was doing more in the process now. And I suppose that's just the practice, and that in time I will just know what that thought is.
Yeah, you're doing a bit more now in order to do less and have a sort of a clearer, more instant sort of recognition at some point. You know, and as I say, don't need to do the labeling very much. It just can give you a sense of these different sort of things that the mind does, and where we can get caught in them. Great, thank you. Okay.
Gillian?
Hi, yeah. I wondered if you could say a bit more about working with sleepiness. I have it's a perpetual issue for me, and particularly with this, I notice, I do the things like working with my eyes open, standing up, and I can be aware of sleepiness, and I can be aware of my aversion, and then I can be aware of trying to be kind, and I can be aware of dulling thoughts, which is because I normally I'm either very busy or very sleepy. So I have the two that I juggle, hindrances. But I just wondered because I try to be kind to it, but it does feel like it is a cloud blocking clarity. And I didn't know if you had any thoughts of how to work with this in this practice.
Okay. Yeah. You could try maybe. I'm just struck by your trying to be kind, which could have quite a lot of. It could be quite effortful, if you like, trying to be kind. In a way, if what's actually happening is some degree of aversion to the experience, then in this practice, if you can notice that aversion with some degree of acceptance, then you've got the kindness there, but in a less effortful sort of way. And perhaps also interest. What's sleepiness like in the mind? What does it feel like in the mind and the body? So I think, interest can, if you like, take the place of that effort.
Yeah, I think it does feel like. I mean, I've really noticed in this week has been really helpful with it, because it's really made it apparent that it is a resistance to me, that it is a way of saying, it feels like it's a resistance to stillness and to going into myself, and it sort of feels like it's a protective thing that I've got. So I don't know. So it's more that I am trying to accept it. But obviously in accepting it, though, it's still there. And so it can mean that I just stop practice. And sometimes I don't know if I should just lie down, or if I've been trying to hold on as long as I can with it and still just experience the drowsiness. And maybe that's what I just keep doing.
Okay, so there's a sense that it's a resistance and protectiveness. So that's something you can also become more aware of. Okay. We have to be quite careful not to to have the idea of what's happening, but the actual experience. Okay, if there's resistance, can you feel that? But make that distinction between what might be a sort of theorizing about why it's there, and what's okay. So there's a felt resistance. Is that in the body? Is that in the mind? Does it manifest as a restlessness, which sometimes sleepiness, we can alternate. So, and having that sense of interest in the process, and actually not minding. Okay, so maybe we're in meditation for the long haul, aren't we? We're working with certain patternings in the mind. So perhaps sleepiness just is there at the moment, and it's going to require maybe not just a few sits to send it on its way, but quite a subtle investigation in this way of awareness, a sort of intuitive awareness, and a willingness to see what's there, see the bigger picture. And within that, you may well fall asleep. You may well get times of, and that's, can that be okay? I think that's okay. And maybe something as well, when we were lying down, doing the lying down meditation, I don't think I said it, or maybe my mic wasn't quite plugged in when I said it, but what we were exploring there was a different quality of awareness, a quality that might really feel quite close to sleep, has this slight rosy glow quality, but there's a softness, and it's still possible to be present, even when the mind feels a little bit, you might call it cloudy, but you might call it just this sort of rosy glow or slight haziness. Sometimes I think we can have an idea about clarity that, it should be like this, but actually, I remember a conversation with my partner and he was talking about clarity, and I thought, I don't think I really very often feel clarity in meditation. But when we were talking, it became clear that what he was calling clarity, I would call subtlety. I would call an ability to really notice really pretty subtle mental events happening. So again, how we frame things is really important. And I'd say this sort of subtle investigation.
Thank you. Thanks, it's really helpful.
Okay.
Okay, Carolyn?
Yeah, I often find myself searching for connections and patterns. And I just wanted to know, do I remember you saying that the mind will make its own connections? That we don't need to make an effort towards searching for that?
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. That's a more personal effort, and the reaching out. In a way, we do want to cultivate the conditions. In a way, awareness and wisdom are best suited to make connections. They'll make connections on a deeper or truer level than we can do with our own minds, which, great as they are for many things, and our thinking capacities are very good in certain ways, but in terms of intuiting a deeper reality that's really implicit in who we are, it's yes, our normal mind, which is probably that searching, often has some sense of craving about it. It's wanting to find out, wanting to know. Hands off, allow awareness, right effort, right view to come up with those connections. It's a masterclass in not controlling, I think. Which is quite counterintuitive for most of us. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks, Vajradevi.
Okay, so maybe we'll just take one more question or one more, whatever's been happening in your practice.
Okay, Joy.
Hi, thank you. I noticed on occasion that it was mostly image that was in my mind. I know that's not always the case. I know that there's a lot of chatter, but on this occasion it was mostly image, and they weren't connected image. They actually, some of them made me laugh, because it was almost like, I wonder if that is what you meant when you said my mind was trying to entertain. In a way, I did feel quite relaxed and quite, yeah, I'm quite back, watching. So it almost, and I've noticed this before, and I just wonder if that is like my mind's going, oh, well, I'm just going to entertain you with these images. Just wonder what you thought about that.
Yeah, no, thanks for mentioning images. I forgot to spell that out. But yeah, sometimes our thoughts, or often our thoughts, either come as mental images, or you have a mental image corresponding to a thought. Sometimes I think that every thought I have, I've got a corresponding mental image. I don't think it is the case with all of them, but certainly some of them. Just to check, did you feel anywhere? Did you feel aware, or did you feel a bit sleepy?
No, I felt very aware. I wasn't sleepy at all. No, I often can be, but I wasn't on this occasion. No.
Yeah, good. So yes, just because what can happen sometimes when we're quite sleepy is we can get certain disconnected images, the hypnagogic images, which can be, one of their qualities is that they can feel a bit bizarre. But this sounds, so one of the things we want is that one of the things we definitely don't need to do is try and work out what it was. We want to, there may be the thought, oh, this is the mind, maybe this is the mind entertaining itself. Seeing that as a thought, until there's a sense of direct knowing, oh, that's what the mind is doing, and you know it. So I think what we're very used to doing with the thinking mind is trying to work things out, or looking to have some reason for what's happening, and it can be. It can take us away from a direct experience, and it can shortcut something that's happening. So until you directly know, it's there's the thought and there's the experience. So what's that experience like? And in a way, just allowing awareness and wisdom to sort of come to their own conclusions, if any, on that may be tomorrow, or it may be 5 years down the line.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. It's particularly helpful for you to ask me about the sleepiness, because I know I do get those, what do you call them, hypnagogic image a lot when I'm in that sleepy place as well, and they can be very bizarre. So thank you. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Good. Hypnagogic. So Deirdre, you got it right. You just want to put an IC on the end. I think anyway. Okay, so wonderful. Thank you for coming forward with your experience and your questions. So let's have a break for tea, not a break from awareness, of course. And I think maybe we won't quite have time to do the second thinking meditation this morning, which is fine. We can do it this afternoon. So let's have 15 minutes for tea. Come back at 15:15. and we'll just have a short just sitting with a reading. And I'll have a little read of the chat while you get some tea. So I'll read something from Thich Nhat Hanh, and I'm afraid I don't know where it's from. Yeah, it's a piece. I call it a river of perception. I'm not sure if that's what it's actually called. So we'll sit for just coming up to 15 minutes, and I'll just say a couple of things before we break for lunch. Just taking up a posture in which you'll feel comfortable during this time. Our thoughts and feelings are like a river. If we try to stop the flow of a river, we will meet the resistance of the water. It is best to flow with it, and then we may be able to guide it in the ways we want it to go. We must not attempt to halt it. Keep in mind that the river must flow, and that we are going to follow it. We can be aware of every little stream that joins it. We can be aware of all the thoughts, feelings, and sensations that arise in us, of their birth, duration, and disappearance. Do you see? Now the resistance begins to disappear. The river of perceptions is still flowing, but no longer in darkness. It is now flowing in the sunlight of awareness. To keep this sun always shining inside of us, illuminating each rivulet, each pebble, each bend in the river, is the practice of meditation. So your task for today, should you choose to accept, so I thought we'd move from the kitchen into the bathroom. It doesn't mean that you don't still notice yeah. What we're looking to do is just extend and diversify the situations and places into which you find it more natural to bring awareness. So whenever you're in the bathroom, you're going to the loo, you're washing your hands, cleaning your teeth, having a shower or bath, just all those moments. And you might notice that you become aware through different senses. So if you like, there's a lot of touch sensations just in the act of washing hands. There can be quite a lot of pleasure in that too, which can also be noticed. I want to suggest one little extra thing, which is to do with, it's just in terms of playing with the practice and extending it. So you could play with what's the first thing that you're aware of when you wake up in the morning? What do you first become aware? Is it sensation in the body? Is it that the mind is thinking? Is it the pressure on your bladder to have a pee? Is it seeing? Is seeing happening? And just seeing, noticing that, just seeing. It may not be it may be very soon after you wake up. It may be once you're in the bathroom, 10 minutes later, or it may be at breakfast. In a way, just play with seeing when awareness is there and when it's not. Where is it managing to have some continuity, and where is it when you think, oh God, I haven't been aware for hours. All that is good information. It's all helpful in terms of, and then you can maybe set up little strategies. So I was thinking in the getting up one, it's like, can you then be aware from leaving your bedroom to arriving at the bathroom? Extending the practice through those movements, so perhaps walking down a corridor or up some stairs or whatever it is. Playing around with goal setting, just little bits of, yeah. I have a friend who does this. He's a community nurse, and so he's, before the lockdown, but seeing a lot of different, going to a lot of different places, and he would just set himself, before he left his car to walk up somebody's drive and knock on his door, he would just sort of, in a way, set awareness, set mindfulness in place, and then and just in these ways give himself more and more times when he's clearly knowing what's happening. And the other one is you can play with being what's the last thing you are aware of before sleep takes over. That can be a nice one to play with. Giving the mind quite a lovely way into sleep to just notice it's quite subtle things happening in mind and body. Okay, and just to say that this evening we'll be at Tara Loka again. Yeah, we're doing we'll have some meditation and a shorter puja, whatever Vajradevi has planned for us. But otherwise, I'll see you later this afternoon, hopefully, and we'll look a little bit more, go into that other way of looking at thoughts. Have a good afternoon.